Today we talk about wide angle versus telephoto. Hey, what's going on everybody? Ethan Hall here today with another video for you, and today we're talking about wide angle versus telephoto lenses. I don't know why I'm holding a clothespin. Well, it's because I was reading that light back there. That's why I was holding a clothespin. Anyway, today we're talking about wide angle versus telephoto lenses, their strengths and weaknesses, my personal favorite type of lens, and all that coming up right now. So first of all, what is the difference between a wide angle lens and a telephoto lens? Well, basically, a wide angle lens is wide. If you know anything about lenses, you'll know that the focal length, or how zoomed in it is measured in millimeters. This lens here, at its widest, is 17 millimeters. This lens here, at its fullest, its most zoomed in, is 300 millimeters. 17 millimeters is going to be very wide, very zoomed out. 300 millimeters is going to be very zoomed in. I could stand 300 feet away from somebody and get a shot of their face because it's a very zoomed in lens. Now, whether you use a wide angle lens or a zoomed in lens is going to depend more on what you're shooting. If you're trying to get a wide shot of a room or of a house or something, you're probably going to want to use a wide angle lens. If you're wanting to get a shot of somebody or something far away, you're most likely going to be using a telephoto lens. So that's what the difference is between them. Now let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of both different lenses. So most people right off the bat think that a wide angle lens is going to be more useful to them because obviously they're going to be using it more to get wide angle shots. And while for the most part that is true, that does not always mean that a wide angle lens is best for every scenario. So let's say I was going to go outside and I wanted to film the front of our house. Most likely I wouldn't want to use a telephoto lens or a zoomed in lens for that. At 55 millimeters, I'm going to have to continually be backing up all the way until I can finally get the shot. Got it. But if I stick a wide angle lens on there, zoom out to 17 millimeters, bam, there you go, it's that easy. Most people's reaction to wide angle lenses are, yes, that's amazing, we all need to get wide angle lenses. And yes, everybody should own one or two wide angle lenses, but there are some drawbacks to using wide angle lenses, which we'll talk about right now. So for me, the biggest drawback to using a wide angle lens is that when you're zoomed that far out, everything can appear to be much closer to the camera than it really is. For instance, let's say I'm using a lens at 17 millimeters, walking around trying to film shots of something, and I get up, 3 feet away from something, it can feel like it's almost hitting you in the face. If you're trying to film a shot of somebody's face and you're at 17 millimeters, you're feeling like you're about to get poked in the face by his nose because it's so zoomed out. So if you want something to look really good, using a zoomed out lens right in front of it probably isn't going to be the best choice. The second main drawback about wide angle lenses is distortion. Some wide angle lenses, especially the cheaper ones, tend to start distorting the image after you zoom really far out. Everything can kind of look weird and kind of trippy, and it's just like odd looking once you get to a certain focal length. Especially once you get really zoomed out. Like I'm talking, there are some lenses that can go to 10 millimeters. When you start to get that far out, it can just start to look odd, and I wouldn't want to use that in most situations. Now obviously, as far as strengths go for wide angle lenses, it's just about what you would think. You can zoom way out, get really good shots. But another strength of using wide angle lenses is the fact that everything will look smoother because you are zoomed out. If you're zoomed really far in on something and trying to walk around, you can get jitters and bumps and they can become really noticeable. Walking around at 17 millimeters, 24 millimeters, everything looks much smoother because there's so much more image to work with. So for anyone who's starting out with gimbal work, working with a stabilizer, even shooting handheld, trying to get really smooth images, using a wide angle lens is definitely a good place to start when you're just learning. All right, let's move on to telephoto lenses, or really we're just talking about lenses that are a little more zoomed in than wide angle lenses. So this particular lens here I'm using is a 75 to 300 millimeter lens. I don't use this one that much because it is very, very zoomed in, only for particular things like if I'm filming sports and I'm trying to get a shot of, a football player, or if I'm outside filming an event or something and I'm trying to get really close up, or filming a wedding, whatever. I'll use something like this so I can really zoom in from far back and get a close-up shot of somebody's face or details, whatever it is. A lens that I probably use a little more often would be just a Canon 50 millimeter lens. This is a great lens that I recommend everybody get when they're just starting out. It's very cheap. This is the Canon 50 millimeter f1.8. 50 millimeters is a great focal length. It's one I use a lot because it just looks very nice. And that's my first point about the strengths of zoomed in lenses, is that they tend to make everything look nicer. Everything just has a nicer feel to it. That's because when you are zooming in a lens, it compresses the image. So you have a lens like this, which is starting out at 75 millimeters. What happens is, as you zoom in to this lens, it's increasing the distance between the pieces of glass, which makes it more and more zoomed in. Basically what that does is it takes the entire image and kind of pushes it together, almost as if the background was being squeezed together with the foreground and compressing the entire image. Now, what that's going to do is make anything that's close to your camera look much more flat. So like we talked about with the wide-angle lenses, when things are close to it, it feels like they're like poking the camera in the lens. With a zoomed-in lens, when something becomes close to the camera, it suddenly feels much more compressed, and for most things, it can tend to look a lot more flattering in the end. Especially when it comes to human faces. It has been said that somewhere between like 70 and 90 millimeters is the best focal length to use on a human face, just because it looks the most flattering and looks the best in the end. So for instance, if I take a shot of someone's human face at 24 millimeters, it looks looks okay. I guess it could be used. But then I zoom in to 75 millimeters and take the same shot of that face, it looks a lot better. And the only reason for that is not because of lighting or because of where we were positioned. It's all the same. Just because we've stepped back and zoomed into their face, which compresses the whole image and makes the faces look a lot more flattering. Now there are some weaknesses that come with using zoomed in lenses, and that's just the fact that as you zoom, obviously the whole image is being compressed and things can start to look kind of weird again, just like it is with a wide angle lens. But in my own experience, I think that they look better zoomed in than they do wide angle. Now as far as what kind of lenses I think are better, I personally prefer the look of a zoomed-in lens over wide angle. I know for some things you just have to use wide angles if you're trying to get shots of a room or trying to get a lot of landscape in one shot. Wide angle works fine. I'm all for that. I've used it plenty of times. But as far as details go, trying to get shots of any kind of detail, any kind of face, using a zoomed-in lens almost always works better unless you're going for a specific effect. So those are just some of my thoughts on the differences between wide angle and zoomed in lenses. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about some of them, what you think some of the pros and cons are. I love to read them. And be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And we'll see you next time with another video for you. And today we're talking about wide angular. So those are just my opinions on the so those are just some thoughts on my. Okay, here we go. So those are just my thoughts on the differences between wide angle and